Hello, welcome to For the Love of Weather. This is the podcast where we explore the Earth's atmosphere and how we are all connected through the weather and climate. We are your hosts. Hi, I'm Gemma.
Hi, and I'm Aisling, and we are here today to chat about the recent heatwave in the UK. It's only over by a couple of days or so at the time of recording, and we just wanted to break down some of the facts and figures. An extraordinary week of weather for anyone working in weather and climate this week, and it happened to coincide as well with London Climate Action Week. But we thought we would just do a quick roundup of what happened.
Yeah, I think we should start back to the weekend before it really kicked off when we had those messages, because we were messaging each other to be like, have you seen that the apps have now got 38, 39 degrees? And we were just like, I can't believe this. I can't believe that the apps already have those temperatures.
Yeah, it was already quite worrying that they were picking them out, and unlike perhaps recent years when initially you see a 40-degree pop in, which happened in 2022, and we saw it a couple of weeks beforehand, but there was only one model run. Quite a few of the apps, not even the more detailed model data and something called ensembles that we use in forecasting, were picking up 40 degrees in a few locations for a few days. However, aside from the fact that we didn't reach 40 degrees, the humidity, the heat was so intense that it is safe to say that no one who's ever been alive in the UK will have experienced some of those intense heat and humidity. You may be familiar with it if you go on holiday somewhere, and even then it would have been an extraordinary hot spell of weather. If you were in like the Canaries, the Mediterranean, even in Egypt, these were extraordinary temperatures. I'm thinking of all of the holiday hotspots.
I mean, one of the things I said last week to anyone I was talking to about the heat was just, it was relentless. It was like day after day. The nights were so warm. And as you say, the humidity was just, there was a study that was done, and it said that around 45% of the cities that were analysed by this study by World Weather Attribution, they had already or were predicted to break their highest ever heat stress levels, and that's the levels of humidity. So yeah, the humidity was ridiculously high.
It was crazy. I think one of the big things as well to pick out here is one of the pushbacks that we always get is that it was hot in 1976, this memorable time in everybody's life that over 50 years ago, or 50 years ago now. And then 2003 as well was a very intense heat wave. There's been others in between there, but this is not even comparable to those. That was almost a trial run of what we are going to see, and we are now experiencing what we thought would happen, but perhaps experiencing it a little bit sooner. The difference between then and now is that that heat was isolated to some small parts of southern England and northern Europe. The rest of the world was not as hot. The whole of Europe was in an intense heat wave. And just for comparison, that 1976, the summer of 1976, is now the sixth warmest on record. It is no longer the warmest June on record. That was already broken last year. And in terms of the warmest years, 1976 was actually a cool year. So let's place that where it is, which is firmly in the past. And we are now living in a very intense future. And I think one of the big things with this heat wave, like many other heat waves we've experienced, was the humidity, as we mentioned, but was the impacts to health, rail, infrastructure, the increase in fire risk. There was so many impacts to this. Schools were closed. Venues were cancelling. People were cancelling in venues. This is going to change how heat waves are going forward. And one of the things actually that popped into my head was insurances. Are people going to start asking now, oh, if there's a heat wave, can I get my money back if I'm booking an event? There's so many things that are going to fall out of this, but I hope the one resounding thing is that fossil fuels are causing climate to warm at a rate that is not natural. The heat wave that we've just experienced is approximately 2 degrees warmer than it would have been in 2003 and 3 degrees warmer than it would have been in 1976. Let's make no bones about it. This is caused from us burning fossil fuels.
Yeah, I mean, that WWA study said that this heat wave was virtually impossible just 50 years ago without human-induced climate change. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean,
it's also worth, it is there. And the reason it's there is that there's these incredible supercomputers and incredible people who know how to model atmospheric physics, fluid dynamics, and that interaction between the ocean and the atmosphere. So these weather models, climate models, are not just run forward in time to say, oh, look, that's what's going to happen. They're run backwards in time to see, did the past actually happen the way that it has happened? So it gives you unequivocal confidence that this is what's happening going forward. When you remove burning from fossil fuels from these weather models and other products, other byproducts as well, actually, that are just as equally as harmful, the world is not as warm as it is. And it's as simple as that.
And if we look, I mean, there's a lot of when we have a heat wave like we saw, we always get people saying it's just summer, and then they, as you say, they compare it to 1976. But there was a study that was released because the heat wave was occurring. I was at an event for the anniversary of the start of the 1976 summer heat wave, and the Met Office had put out some projections of looking at if that heat wave that occurred in 1976 occurred today, as you say, it would be about 3 degrees warmer. But they also looked at what that heat wave could look like in 2056 if we continue to emit like we are. And they said that that heat wave, a similar heat wave, we would see 9 consecutive days with temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. So we've had one day of exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. Think of 9 days in a row with somewhere in the UK exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. And they said that temperatures could reach as high as 45 degrees Celsius.
Mm.
And so looking ahead, you just think that the heat wave that we just had is just a taste of what could be to come if we just continue to emit like we are without taking any action. Like we really do need to start taking action.
So just to round up last week as well. So in June, that record was 35.6 degrees Celsius, although I would argue, and I know you do too, Gemma, sometimes these maximum temperature numbers are not the thing that we want to be focusing on. It was the intense heat and humidity, the anomalous temperatures that are 15 degrees above where they should be, 15 degrees above where they should be. But that 1976 record was 35.6 on Wednesday. It was broken at 36.1. On Thursday, it was 36.7. And on Friday, it was 37.7 degrees Celsius in June. June is not our warmest month of the year historically. July and August are our warmest month of the year. Records shouldn't be broken like that. It's like breaking the 100-meter record by 2 seconds. There has to be something else at play here. And as we know, it's the burning of fossil fuels. But it wasn't just us. Gemma, do you want to do a little roundup of Europe? And actually, at the moment, my sister lives in Europe, and she is still, that heat wave is moving eastwards. She is now in that heat wave and is really struggling, and it's even hotter than it is here. And sadly, there has been deaths already from this intense heat, including children, not just from cold water shock, from overheating in cars. And the numbers we won't actually fully know yet.
Yeah, no, we won't. And as you say, yeah, it's across Europe. We had records broken not only in the UK, France, Germany, Austria, Denmark recording, breaking records. I saw over the weekend that Denmark had recorded its highest temperature on record. On Saturday, it recorded, so Saturday the 27th of June, it recorded 37 degrees Celsius. So records are just being broken all over Europe in this heat wave. And as you say, they're not just being broken by a small amount, they're being broken by a huge amount. And to put the UK heat wave and the breaking that record into context, so at the end of May, we beat the May temperature record by a huge amount as well. And this is the second month in a row that we've seen monthly temperature records broken in the UK. And that's the first time since 1911 that 2 consecutive months have observed records temperatures broken. And we're only at the start of summer. I mean, we've still got July and August to go. And the forecast is for us to have hotter than average temperatures during the summer, further heat waves to come. We were just talking before we started recording at next week. There's already signs that we could see another spell of hot weather next week. And so, yeah, I mean, as a weather forecaster and someone that works in weather and climate, I'm really worried. I'm really worried about what we're already seeing and what we could see in the future. Like, we've had many conversations about how shocked we are about what we're seeing. And it is really worrying. It's really, really worrying.
Yeah, I think one of the reality is though that amongst, if you're in weather and climate, you probably feel really passionately about this and um, have been talking about it a lot. It coincided with that 1976 anniversary as well. So historic that there was an anniversary for it, 50 years, and it was just obliterated. Outside of weather and climate, I saw in the news something called Vox Pops. So Vox Pops are where you go and interview people and they ask them how are they doing in the weather. And so many of them were just saying, well, I guess it's not so bad that it's hot. It's a bit warm in my flat. And it's really worrying that you do realize you are in your own little echo chamber. On the other hand, I have had people online say to me they're struggling insulin dependency, so insulin needs to be kept cooler and on ice. Um, Somebody else was talking about their husband who was in heart failure. They're not going to manage very well in this heat. There's so many other people going through treatment, people who live in high-rise blocks or even in flats in general, even if they're lower, they are just so incredibly warm. There's been so much more impact to this heat wave than I think most people actually realize. And I guess, ironically, my hope for this heat wave is that people start to sit up and pay attention. And we always say no one person can do everything, but everyone can do something. And we do try and do things, we really do. But what we really need is the help to come from the top down to make it possible to actually be able to make better decisions about how our homes are heated,
Yeah.
having heat source pumps that produce much less carbon. There's so many better decisions that could be made, or people could be helped to be made, or don't even have to think about making, because I totally understand working in the world of news. There are people who are going to food banks. There are people who are in severe distress, crises. There's lots of other things going on in the world, and we need to make it possible for everybody to be able to make better decisions.
We're also at a stage now where we have to adapt to our current climate that has changed. We need to become more resilient. We need to think about things like adding green spaces and trees to our cities, because last week there was a huge difference. If you were in a park under some shade, the temperatures there were way lower than they were out on the pavement. So we need to think about those things. We need to think about our transport system. There were so many trains that were delayed or cancelled. They closed part of a motorway as well because they were worried about overhead electricity lines. So we do need to think about how we adapt to the heat waves that we're seeing, but also just generally the more extreme weather that we're getting here in the UK. But yeah, we also need to mitigate, as you say, and reduce our emissions. It's like a combination of everything. But the longer we wait to make those changes, the worse things get. So we have to start taking action now. We have to start doing things now.
I think as well, what was upsetting, for as much as I felt like I was struggling here at home or going between work, or sort of the juggle between family life and all the other things that were happening around that week, as well as being needing to be really present in my job. Um, I saw some of the reports coming out of India and the intense heat wave that they're experiencing. And for anyone who thinks that their actions don't make a difference, I would urge you to just Google heatwave in India, for example, just to see what those people are up against. And this is not their fault at all. And I found that very distressing and a real reality check.
Yeah.
Not that I needed one, but that was, or somebody says it's not going to, one small thing doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. And just looking around the rest of the world. And then if you think that other people aren't doing stuff for climate, well, then if you're not doing anything for climate, then you are impacting somebody else. That's the reality. You're saying that's not my problem and then passing it on to somebody else.
Yeah.
But I'm not talking about the day-to-day stuff, the small things.
This is
The
where the
individual things
communication
that
comes
this
in.
is where the communication comes in, and where decisions need to be made easier for people to make better decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've spoken about it on the podcast many a times. I mean, when we spoke to Bernadette, she said communication is a climate solution. And actually during London Climate Action Week, I went to a few events and I heard the similar message was coming up, like communication. We need to be communicating this. It is a solution. And we do that our little bit through the podcast and through the jobs that we do. But we need to be communicating it way more.
I think actually, before we sort of sign off, I might just leave you with a lovely little Instagram post that you wrote, Gemma. I'm just going to grab it up on my phone.
Oh, okay.
Of course, I'm prepared.
I didn't know this was happening.
Yeah, it's our podcast that we can do. We like, right? Yeah, so we did do, so I spoke at London Climate Action Week, which was lovely. And the lovely Gemma, as always, was there as my sidekick and my support.
Ash was amazing. She was absolutely amazing.
Tell
I
me
was there
about that.
cheering her
Anyway.
on. Go Ash! Go Ash!
But she did do a beautiful post. And actually, I had written down some notes as well. And so some of the key messages that we took away from, and perhaps some of the key messages that we will leave you with today, was that people remember how a place makes them feel. They really do. There's a reason people remember the summer of 1976. It was something so extraordinary. They remembered how they felt. We protect what we love. Wherever you live, wherever you are, you're probably quite protective of it, or you'll maintain it, look after it. If you've got a little leak, you'll fix it. If there's, I don't know, a tile coming off the wall, you'll fix it. We maintain what we love, and that includes the earth, whether it's your garden, your plant pot, or whatever space that you have, or green space that you have, or greenery in your house, you look after it. We choose how we spend our money, and that is very true. And it's not lost on us that we have a decision about how we spend our money, but not everybody else does. You know, we are lucky that I was able to choose to buy some extra fans for the house to cool the house down. So we know that.
But also on that note was the message that come through about that as well, was that governments see how we spend our money. And if we're spending our money in a certain way, governments see that. And they're like, oh, hang on a minute. People do care about this. They are concerned about this. So that's another factor to think about when we're thinking about how we spend our money. People who have the power see that, and then they can then make decisions on that as well.
Yeah. And climate change is now, it's almost a communication issue and pointing these things out to people. So I just think, even if you don't have this idea that climate change exists, surely we can find the common ground that we don't want our rivers to be polluted, and reducing air quality pollution. That was another thing from this week. The intense heat and humidity creates ozone down at the surface, which is terrible for people who have even mild asthma. I've had anecdotally loads of people say this to me just this week alone. Surely we can all agree that we would just like a cleaner environment for everybody to live in.
I know I do.
Yeah, I do too. But I think hang on to our hats, because the summer is not quite done yet. And somehow we won't need to be chasing facts and figures, because we'll be breaking the ones that have already happened.
Yeah.
This week, May already broke records. We've already broke them.
Yeah.
I suspect that we'll be breaking them again.
And in the meantime, we're going to rest and recuperate after the busy week we've just had, in preparation for what may be about to come.
I know. And yeah, normal life for the moment resumes. And actually, my final thought is, I think one of the stories that really struck me this week, aside from seeing some really sad footage from parts of Asia and also parts of Europe as well, where my sister lives, where I live, a MRI scanner broke because of the heat, so it wouldn't function. So 250 people's appointments were cancelled. Now, if you've ever been in a position where you're waiting on an MRI or you needed an urgent MRI, I can tell you that is no joke to have 250 people's appointments cancelled. If you imagine the knock-on effect, the delay that may have in somebody's treatment or somebody's results, and all the people then that would have followed the next day, and then and actually the next day they were waiting for the scanner to cool down. That's here near me. I feel grateful that wasn't me, but I feel so incredibly sad for the people that it did impact. And that was only one of the many stories that made it into the news this week. And then there will be many that didn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that not so happy note. We do hope that you've enjoyed this episode. They were our key takeaway thoughts from the heat just from this week alone, but a reminder that we've had this podcast for 6 years now.
Yeah, 6 or 7 years, yeah.
And all we've wanted to do is talk about weather and climate and how we are all connected. And perhaps 6 years later, we have a moment where we all agree that we are all connected in everything that we do and everything, how we go about our daily lives, because it did impact our daily lives last week.
It really did. And if you've enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would subscribe, rate, review. We release podcasts about many different topics, and we're hoping to do more like this where we respond to extreme weather events. If you want to follow us on social media, we are For the Love of Weather. And as always, we just really hope that you leave this episode loving the weather just that little bit more.
Thanks for always listening. Bye-bye.